Hey, fam. Are you guys loving this
Hi.
season so far? Because, like, we've got a lot more exciting guests for you, too. Did you know that?
Yeah, guys. I'm super pumped for this season. And I love that we're just getting new and different kind of guests from different parts of the industry. And like
Mhm.
today, what an amazing guest to have to really pick the brain of. Who do we have, girl?
Yeah, so today we have Alex Wiggins. He is a screenplay analyst for Coverfly and a coordinator at Concourse Media, which is a sales agency. And I actually met Alex virtually because he is a fellow alumni of Washington and Jefferson College. We didn't go to school together. He was a little bit after me, but Dr. Marish, shout out, connected us. So that was really awesome because as soon as I found out what he did, I was like, okay, we need to meet you like professionally for our purposes, but also like you need to come on the show and tell our listeners about what you do. And it's been like this episode, I know we learned a lot and it's going to be super helpful for us for our upcoming project. So I think you guys are going to benefit from learning this stuff too, because if anybody listening is a professional filmmaker that's, you don't know the whole distribution stuff yet, like this is a very helpful episode for you guys. So I think you're really going to enjoy it.
Yeah, we talk about what to do with a completed script and how to present it to sales agencies or where you can even have people review it. It's going to be super beneficial, I think, for anyone who's looking at those next steps, just like we are. So, yes, selfishly, we ask a lot of questions, but I hope you guys get those takeaways that we got from it because, oh, wow, it's a good one. It's a good one.
Silence, le cœur des gens amoureux.
Awesome. Well, yeah, let's get right into it. And I would just like to hear like, so since college, did you do the internship while you were in school or was that after?
It was just after I
Okay.
had applied to it while I was in school, because technically that was one of the requirements that while you at least applied. But they contacted me a year or so after I had graduated, and I wasn't ever expecting to hear back from these
Yeah.
people. Uh,
A year or two after.
yeah,
Wow. That's wild.
it was the one of the most shocking things that's ever happened to me. I was ready to not really give up on doing film stuff, but I was so frustrated at that point with, kind of a lack of momentum
Right.
going on in my acting and writing career.
Hmm.
Like I was doing it, on the side while I was working an office job, and I still loved writing and all that, but it was that point where you're just like, all right, when is this going to happen?
Yeah.
Right.
We have definitely struggled through that for sure. I mean, I think anyone pursuing any artistic career like goes through that at some point and it's just whether or not you keep going. But that's such a cool thing to hear like I mean that's like, auditioning for something and never hearing back and then getting a call back like months later. It's like, "What? No, really? This is happening?" Okay, like that's such a cool feeling. So, tell us then about the internship and how that kind of got you started.
I interned for the company I work with now, Concourse Media. We are a sales agent slash film producer. And basically, what that means is we can produce our own
Mhm.
movies and raise funding for them, or we can take other projects that are still in developmental stages, like if there's a script, director is attached, they have some funding. Maybe we can source additional funding
Mm.
from private investors.
That's very nice. Very nice. Yes. Yes, yes.
Yeah, that's what people say sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, because it takes a lot. I mean, I'm learning more doing a bunch of been producing some micro budget films this past year, and you just see how money just goes like that for like any given thing, and
Yeah.
it just keeps me in the forefront that you can do a lot with a little. That is possible, but it's just nice to have more just for those like, emergency cases. Like you want to be really smart, but having a cushion is really vital because you will go into the cushion like
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, you know?
Definitely. You definitely cannot have too much money.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's really amazing. And then the sales agency part, just to reiterate that to listeners who might not even be familiar with what a sales agent does or agency does for filmmakers.
Right. A sales agent is basically a third party who connects the producers and whoever is working on the film and has a completed project. We put that in front of a distributor
Mm-hmm.
and ensure that you get the best bang for your buck for whatever deals you're going to be making to get your movie put out into theaters and streaming platforms and all that good stuff.
Yeah. And it sounds to me like it's a pretty vital part of the process. I mean, I know a lot of people that self distribute their own stuff, or they've made relationships with distributors and they don't need to go through a sales rep or a sales agent. But like, if you don't already have that established, relationship or audience, like it is so vital to get you that connection to bridge that gap because it's not easy. And a sales rep
Oh,
knows what they're doing and you usually don't if you're at that point in your career. So, yeah, it's a very important piece of the puzzle.
we have helped a lot of independent films get their foot in the door and that we continue to have working relationships with. It's like you said, once you get that connection, you might not need a sales rep every single time,
Mm-hmm.
but depending on your project and what you're trying to accomplish, sales rep can get you money for your film all across the board better. Instead of you taking like the first deal you can find, we will sometimes say, no, that's not good enough. We think we can do better by, for example, selling your film territory by territory across the world,
Mhm.
which might take a little bit longer, but the money speaks for itself there.
Yeah. And I think
That is huge.
that's something too that a lot of non-filmmakers who are interested in the process but don't have the experience themselves don't really realize is things like global sales and foreign market sales and all that kind of stuff is like I know the importance of it, but I have no idea the market for it. You know what I mean? And that's something that again, you like really need a sales agent to help you figure out because it's tough to know those things. That's a lot of research to do, but it is a really important part of it. It's a really good way to make your film make some money.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not a complete expert at this. I've just been doing it a little bit here and there.
Mm-hmm.
But my boss, he knows like right off the back of his hand if this movie will make money in this territory, just based on the genre, the cast, and all those variables.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you don't want to go in blind doing
Right.
something like that. You want to have someone who's been doing this for years and has experience selling movies all around the world and knows what works where, just based off genre, project budget and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I have a question. At
Yeah.
what point does an independent filmmaker try to approach a sales agency? Is it always after the whole film has been produced and packaged and ready to really like market to a sales agent to like have that relationship come about? Because I know also like sales agencies also have to accept those films and see that they're valuable for all those different markets.
It can be at any stage of development, really. Uh, if
Mm,
the finished project is, it's done and it's a finished project, at that point, it's about the quality of the film more or less than what people are saying that they can bring to the table of an unfinished project.
Mhm.
hmm No, and that's like a huge distinction or at least an opportunity to think about how you want to go about it, because like the something that I think Tess and I are still trying to get a better hold on is wanting to get go the investor route for funding. And so how do we numerically know what we can produce numbers wise in sales at the end of it, right? And I just feel like I kind of would love to have a handle of that before we even finish the film, to really know, like, have a strategic plan for distribution. You know what I mean? And so I just feel like, yeah, is it just trying to come to pitch to a sales agency even beforehand is an option for us?
It definitely is. Like right now, I'm talking to people on both sides of that spectrum.
Mhm.
People who have a finished product and people who have a screenplay and they have a director attached and a pitch deck.
Yeah,
Um,
that's cool.
Yeah, that is really good to know because it's like you said, Carolina, it's hard sometimes to be able to like give numbers to investors of what they can expect, especially if you are a brand new filmmaker. Maybe you've made some shorts or whatever, like you can show your work, but you can't necessarily show how successful it could possibly be because you never made a feature before. So yeah, having that relationship early on in that developmental stage seems very beneficial to me. And I guess it depends too of, where your level of experience is. If you have made more films, if you have those relationships, maybe you can wait until it's finished and then just go find a sales rep. So it all just depends, I guess, where you're at, but it's nice to know that that's an option.
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. You can take whatever you have and reach out to people. And if the script is good and if there's financing behind it, those are, I find, the most attractive features of something that we get that isn't completed yet.
Mhm.
Just show us the numbers that you have and the projects. And maybe if you have one or two, somewhat experienced people attached that even if they're not a big name, if they've even directed an episode of like a big ABC show or something like that, or the special effects person on such a show,
Mhm.
that stuff all looks really good, and you want to brag as much as you possibly can in like a pitch deck and then send it over.
Yeah, that's a good reminder for our listeners. Like, don't be humble when you're pitching.
No,
Like, it's literally a brag session. So,
that's entirely what it is. It's like you're. It's not like a game of
I
poker.
was
yeah.
You're not
just
calling
gonna say
bluffs.
you got to show all your cards. I literally was gonna do a poker analogy because it's like, why would you? You're not this. These are the people that need to know the infrastructure and the, like, what talent you're bringing in. That goes across board from actors to your team, your production
Mhm.
team. So always, yeah, like, name all the credits. Well, name all the juice. Like, I love that you said that. That is exactly what I was thinking. Like, why would you want to do that?
All that does, if you don't, put all your cards on the table, that just slows the process down and maybe
Mm,
ensures, maybe lessens the chance that someone will get back to you.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes
Like,
sense. I know Carolina and I were just involved in a pitching competition, which we haven't heard the results of yet. But for us, it was tough because, there's several teams involved in this. So we got like a very strict small time window to present the pitch for. And there were so many things that we wanted to say. And of course, you do still want to keep your pitch concise and you don't just want to ramble on. But it was so hard to fit it in that like few-minute window because we did have a lot of things to brag about for our film. We were excited about it. So, it's a reminder, I guess, for us and listeners, like, you do want to keep it short and sweet, but like, don't be afraid to brag. Like, say all the cool things you want to say. Like, they're not going to have that 3-minute timer. So, brag, take your time and do it right.
absolutely. And that's what I try to help all of the people that I'm putting in front of my boss to. Like, there was this one guy I met at Sundance a couple years ago, and he had a script, and he was a very artistically driven guy. And honestly, I had no idea if he could actually bring anything to the table. And I was also really new at the job. I was was reading a script. I'm like, yeah, this is great, dude. And then I told my boss about it. He's like, well, does this guy have equity? Like, who is he?
Mhm.
And
Mm-hmm.
like, my boss was kind of thinking, yeah, this is just some random dude you met. But then I find out, hey, dude, what are you about? He was like, yeah, we've got $300,000. I'm like, oh shit, okay,
That's a big chunk of change.
There
yeah, not
you
bad.
go. And like again, it like you were saying before, it kind of slows your process down when you don't give like the information, to someone who could bridge that relationship really like, he could have had a jump start maybe even faster had he
Mhm.
had the 300,000, had all of that. So it's like I guess people can be weird with money though, like talking about it. So maybe that's like a reminder too, like don't be shy to again say what you have and what you're working on funding wise.
Yeah.
I'd say it's mostly when you're talking to a sales agent, it's less about the art and it is more about the
Yeah.
Yeah.
business. The art is important. You need like good stuff, but if you just send, like three pitch decks that are, very pretty and have good, stories and stuff, that means absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
If you don't have anyone attached or you don't give us all those other details about how far the project is in development.
Hmm. That's a
So
good distinction too, because we've been talking about this pitch competition that we mentioned to our listeners for a while, and like the people we were pitching to in this competition are just independent investors. So for them, it depended on the person. There were three judges. One was very interested in specifically the business side of it, like what a sales agent would be interested in. One was specifically interested in the story, so more the artistic side. So like you have to know who you're pitching to, whether it's investors that do care about
versus
the art
sales.
versus sales that
Yeah.
just care about the business. So that's an important distinction.
Definitely. And I guess it depends on which, sales agent you're going with.
Yeah.
I'm sure everyone's a bit different, but the way that we do it at Concourse, I read the scripts and I analyze them and basically determine whether or not the quality is
Hmm.
good.
Mm.
Sometimes that doesn't even matter as much, and it'll whoever's attached to it will be taken more into consideration.
Hmm.
But that other part, the artistic side, that creates somewhat of an interest. If it's not as good artistically, but there are all these famous people attached, my boss will put it on the back burner.
Hmm.
And if it gets more funding, he might put some in.
Mm.
Whereas it's opposed to if it was really good artistically and it had a lot of funding, then we want to set up a call with these people soon.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's also like, it's good to know that if you don't get a yes right away, it doesn't mean that it couldn't be a yes in the future if you can beef it up, with more to present.
Absolutely. There are always, projects that I've read that I'm like, yeah, this is like a 6 out of 10,
Hmm.
but, maybe there are rewrites coming, and then that will change
Mm.
our interest levels based on that.
Yeah, that makes
And
sense.
what about as a team like us where I'm the director and I'm not a name, but we have, let's say our script's an 8 out of 10. Let's or like close to 10 out of 10. Like it's a pretty banging script. And I'm a new director, so I don't have all those big name credits, but we have some source funding. Would someone like us be taken into consideration at that point?
Absolutely. There was a guy recently I had just tried to set a meeting up with my boss, and I'm not going to say his name, but he is like an anomaly because he's 20 years old
Wow.
and he made this movie 3 years ago when he was 17.
Wow.
And it is, yeah, seriously, you look at people like that and you're like, what the hell was I doing with my life?
Oh yeah,
Uh,
we had a
Yeah.
15-year-old filmmaker on our podcast. Shout out to Morgan.
I was just gonna say that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she is crushing it, doing like like just her knowledge of production. I'm just like, wow, at high school, like it's crazy. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So he shot this film 3 years ago at 17. You were saying?
at 17, and for 3 years he's been looking for a sales agent. And I'm thinking, how is he still not being represented? This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Wow.
But
I
but yeah, we got a meeting with him and it went pretty well. I don't know what stage we're at now. That's why I can't really say his name,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah.
Yeah.
hopefully
No,
he
fair.
accepts it.
I wonder if it did have something to do with the fact that he is so young that, the sales agents kind of passed him by thinking, oh, what could he have accomplished, sort of thing, because that is sometimes the mindset in in show business is a lot of times, the inexperience, people don't want to take the time to really look into what they can do. Which is disappointing because sometimes people, I mean, we always say like your first film's gonna suck, but there are those people, like you said, the anomalies that like genuinely just they've got it and they do it from the get-go. So it's always worth looking into it, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. You never know uh, who can be the next Stanley Kubrick.
Hmm. Carolina, I'm so glad we started using Vitafair. Should we tell the Femme Fam about it?
Absolutely, Tessa. I mean, we were able to upload our short film for less than $6, and we can charge whatever we want for a 24-hour rental.
That's right. We could have charged $20 per view if we wanted, but we decided to go with their micro-pricing model, which makes it a fair price for viewers and still makes us more money than the competitors that only pay out cents per hour of viewing instead of per rental.
Plus, our audience doesn't have to pay for a subscription. It's really a win-win for both sides. Fair trade film monetization.
Vitafair. Live in fairness with video. Yeah.
What scripts get you excited, Alex? Like what are signs that you feel like the screenwriter is hitting all the right points if someone's like in rewrites right now and they're like, am I ready to show this to a industry professional? Is there any tips on that you would have?
100%. Yeah, there was, I don't know, Tessa, if you ever knew Scott Frank.
I did, yeah. And I took his storytelling class.
Oh, so you know about the hero's journey then.
Yeah.
Scott Frank taught me, and everyone he teaches a screenwriting class to, that the hero's journey is the vital components that you need to tell a story. And if it doesn't have some of those components, or the vital ones, such as like a hero has a compelling obstacle and is constantly moving forward in that world, if it doesn't have those and it's more of like a visual thing, or
Mm-hmm.
it just drags and you find that the author is just having a conversation with their own ego and there's no conflict, or
Mm,
the conflict is not compelling enough or presented in such a way that the audience will be able to understand it from their own point of view, then I usually pass on those. Those are called bad scripts, in my opinion.
Mhm.
Uh, but anything that you can read, that you can see that this person is struggling to overcome something that is compelling
yeah.
to you, to the point that you can envision yourself in that circumstance even, then I think that regardless of my opinion on the subject matter of the script, if I find it compelling to read, I'll keep reading it, and I'll give it, a suggestion like, yeah, it should be shown to somebody
Mhm.
at least.
No, that's a really, I think I love the examples you gave about the different variations that could be missing the whole hero's journey. And it just helps you kind of look at your script in a different way, if that makes sense. Like if
Mhm.
anyone's listening to that, it's like, to me it's like, okay, I want to go reread and make sure like I'm hitting those emotional and the growth points of the
Mhm.
hero. And it's a little tricky too when maybe the hero isn't like, your Superman kind of hero, if that makes sense. But just, I guess, tackling, like for us in their psychological thriller, the conflicts within, like that are maybe holding you back even more than the external conflicts. That's something that I could definitely just make sure that we're hitting those points. It's a really good. I love that you said that. It's a
And
really
I
good
think
tip.
that we did, and as a reminder to our listeners, like it's okay to, like, depending on what kind of writer you are, like if you just want to word vomit it out and then go back and make sure that you hit those points too, or if you're the person that wants to outline like these are the points that need to be hit. Because I know for us, like, you had written like the full draft, Carolina, and we went back with like a beat sheet and we're like, okay, what is this point? Did we hit this point?
Yeah.
Is this point? Like trying to figure all those things out. So, you still want to hit all of those points for sure, but it's okay to, like, however you
Yeah.
write to get there.
And I would love to piggyback on that. Like I tell people who have a hard time like doing a full beat sheet from the start. I did start with one with like a solid like beginning, middle, like what the turning points were, and then the final image. And
Denouement before the end, one of my
yes,
favorite words.
exactly, exactly. And I just being able to at least know where I'm going and then allow the inspiration to kind of flow, because I just can't just like structurally I can't outline pages and pages without at least knowing where it's kind of going. But I want to I like to allow the inspiration to kind of hit me throughout. And then then we went back after I kind of did that first throw up draft, and then went in beat per beat and made sure that we had all those points. So I mean, I just tell people, don't be afraid to kind of like be loose with it if you're not as structured like from the start as like some people are, because some people are, they can really just like right away nail a really detailed beat sheet, and I'm impressed by those people. I can't do that at this point. That's not
And
how my brain works.
it's also a matter of, like, you can't break the rules unless you know them, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Because there are some really good films that are totally out there. They don't follow like the way that they're supposed to, quote unquote. But you have to know all of the things that you should hit in the hero's journey, in whatever you want to call it, because if you're not going to hit one of those things, there has to be a reason why. So if you want to break those rules, you have to know what rules you're breaking and why, or else it's not going to be a structured story. And I mean, if you're going to go make like art house movies that don't make any sense, sure, fine. Like then you're going for the visuals or whatever.
But those typically won't sell
Right.
right away, at
Right.
least, unless you're just, yes, the god.
Unless you're David Lynch, you're not
Exactly,
going to sell a random
exactly.
art house movie. But yeah.
So that's like, I think, I forgot the writer that I listened to. Dang it, what's his name? It'll come to me. But he says it right off the bat too. Like, don't be for your first film, or if you're a first writer, you, like you said, you need to know the rules to break them. So don't go for your first like art house film if you've never like written a full like hero's journey before.
Yeah.
I think. Would you agree with that?
I think that, like you all said, everyone is different in their process of writing. And I agree that most people's first draft of a script is just going to be a bunch of raw
Yeah.
energy that needs to be rearranged and some stuff taken out, some stuff added, which is fine. And, everyone's hero is different.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be like a Superman type person. Like you can look at dark heroes, like even in that Joker movie,
Yeah.
that's considered a hero's journey,
Mhm.
and he is very far from a hero.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, I love that you said that. It's true. It's true.
Yeah. I'm curious too, how a producer goes about like connecting with you guys and getting a meeting with you guys. And I mean, you kind of told us what they should bring to the table or what's going to help their pitch, but just how does that whole process get started? Because I think a lot of times we tend to learn about in class and share with our listeners like, okay, like once you get a meeting with an investor, like this is what you need to present to them, but how do you find those investors? So like how do they connect with you guys as a sales agency?
From my understanding, we get a lot of submissions directly to our website,
Okay.
and anyone can submit. And it will show up in my inbox, maybe. Uh, or my boss has a lot of relationships already right now with people that submit to him through mutual connections. But if you really don't know anyone and you want to start the process kind of raw, invest in IMDb Pro
Mhm.
and then narrow your search results based on what you're looking for, because that's how I find movies that I want to represent for distribution. I just go on IMDb Pro, I
Hmm.
look for the genres I like, look for, stuff like that, and I reach out to them just by email because their contacts are there.
Mhm.
I, say who I am and say, hey, I'd love to watch your movie. Let's see if we can set up a call.
That's really cool because I feel like a lot of times as filmmakers and as actors, we have to deal with in this day and age a lot of like scam stuff that, it's people reaching out, whether it's a sales agency, whether it's like an agent to represent you or whatever. And they're like, oh, I found you online and I want to, have a meeting and stuff. And like, that does still happen and it is still legitimate, but it also is scams that you have to watch out for. So it's good to know that legitimate sales agencies do find you on IMDb and contact you.
Yeah, I don't know how many people are really doing it that way,
Mhm.
honestly. And I do it that way because that's just the best way I can find them because I don't have all the big contacts. That's my
Yeah.
boss. But I find people who he was surprised that I found.
Okay.
Really?
Like,
And is it
absolutely.
people like you were saying, like you asked to see their movie? So when you're seeing like exactly what you're seeing on IMDb is their film poster and a log line, and that's it? Like, and that's enough to get you interested? You know what I'm saying? What
Um,
is it that, will lead you to actually hitting contacts, sending an email?
There are a few factors like the log line, the poster's important. I like to look at the filmmakers, and even if they're not big names, I like to look at what they've worked on before, how long they've been doing it, any accolades they might have. Whether, that's not the most important thing,
Sure.
but
But it
But
definitely
that's why
plays
I
it's
like to.
into
good
it.
to have your, I think we had with Carrie Nasina an IMDb for specific to really actors, but this translates to filmmakers too, to really have, your IMDb up to date and
Mhm.
to list everything you're working on. And if you listeners, you haven't listened to that, even if you're not an actor, like I think there's some gems too for filmmakers to, like, things you wouldn't even think to list. Like we listed our podcast. That's like a valid source. So things like
Mhm.
that where you can really
Absolutely.
like show your producing skills and the audience you've built, et cetera, et cetera. So that's really important to know that,
Yeah.
sales agents are looking at you like that. And so
Yeah.
it's important to have that up to date.
Exactly. You want to treat it like a resume almost,
Mhm.
because that's how people will base
Mm,
their decision to contact you.
Yeah. And it is too, I think we had mentioned this in that same episode with Carrie, that it's kind of a game you have to play too, like a thin line that you have to walk, because you want to show all of the things that you can do. You want to show you're a producer, you're a writer, you're an actor, whatever, whatever. But you also want to target it for who you hope is looking for you. Like if you
mm,
are mostly an actor, you want like that to be what people really see when they search on your page. And like for me personally, like, obviously Carolina and I are filmmakers, but I'm really an actor first. Like that's what I'm pursuing the most. So I make sure that like the credits they're really like seeing the most are acting. But then, we've acted in our own things. So like it also says producer there or writer or whatever. So it's just like being able to make sure people can see those things, but it's targeted, and it's just there's ways to do it, but it's complicated and it's annoying that you have to play that game, and it would be nice if you could just list everything you do so people know. But you want people to, when it's an agent that's looking for actors to represent, to see you're an actor first. That's what you care the most about. When it's a sales agency looking for a movie, so it's
that's a
just
good point.
targeting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So people look at my IMDb for producing, then look
Yeah.
at Tessa's for acting credits. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm just like tied in there. Yeah, mine's like I've tried to make it more actor first, but I'm just too many like now, like more so producer credits. And I'm like, it's okay, it is what it is. I'm like, yes, I produce primarily now, for sure.
I think being a jack of all trades like that is really useful,
Hmm.
Oh, I
and because
completely
you
agree. Hmm.
you use it, like Tessa said, if you wanted to primarily pursue acting, that can be on your page, and then you have your production company listed, so people who are interested in that can just click there, and they can see that side of you.
Yeah. Yeah. And
That's
we do.
and it's refreshing to hear that like
Yeah.
you feel that way. You don't have like some tainted perspective that hinders you at all. I think being able to do more than one thing is so empowering in whatever you are primarily focused on. If you're a
Mhm.
director but you've acted before, I mean that makes you a better director in my opinion. Like
Yeah.
just knowing the actor perspective, or if you're a producer and you've done directing and writing, you know what they're up against creatively, but also like you can handle the financial sides better then and be smarter to communicate. So I love that you don't see that as like a red flag, that if you're an actor but then you have a production company, like what you're trying to do, you know what I mean?
No, I think it's a smart thing actually for actors to work as producers too.
Hmm.
Hell yeah. I
Honestly,
Yeah.
especially now, like it's so rare to see people that aren't a multi hyphenate. And I think that, I mean, we talk on the show all the time how that can benefit you, but it just you kind of need to, because it's very hard to just get your name out there as one thing, unless you get really lucky and have some big break. Like you need to have multiple things that you can show for yourself. And it's dumb that it's sometimes a catch-22 of like, well, you know, an agency wants to see that you're really concentrating on acting and you have time for that before they rep you. They want to make sure you're not busy doing something else. But honestly, I think that's kind of bullshit. I think that it's more
I was
important
just gonna say,
to
fuck 'em.
have all of that stuff. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't care. But I think it isn't a skill that everyone has, but I think everyone should at least be aware and like try to build those skills, especially recently working with more directors. I'm like, oh God, I wish they could learn producing more. Like they just don't know or don't care what we're up against on the producer side. And that just like rolls into budget, safety, like everything that you're managing on set. So I will just say, like, I think it's super important to try and at least understand what the role is doing and how that works, so you can work together and not feel like this is a battle between producer, director, or actor, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is the worst thing you just described. If you are
just wrapped a set like that. I wanted to kill myself. So
that was not one of our projects, just saying.
Yeah, not one of our me, and I'm so grateful, like and I just being able to produce for other people now, I'm like, damn, like Tessa and I have it good. Like just being able to, like, you know, she'll be the first to say she doesn't love producing, and I don't love it 100% of the time either, but the awareness and the organization and the ability to communicate and know how to support teams is huge. And without that, it just turns into the horror show on set for like everyone. So I just feel like we are, you know, it's funny because we feel like still fresh in the industry, but with the work we've done and how we operate, which could seem almost non-traditional, which is absurd to me, because I think people, creatives, they can feel more free or not be super, like, I don't want to say corporate, but professional in that way. And it's like, no, like if we want better pay, we want better, like, in a better, safer, healthier environment for our crew members, then you should be treating it professionally like anyone would at a corporate job. You should be communicating to that level that everyone feels like they're in the loop and there's things in place or systems in place. So I just, seeing how others are operating, I'm like, you know, Tessa and I, we're pretty good. I feel like we're gonna, you know, we're still got lots to learn. I'm humbled to say that, but at the least I feel like we wouldn't have those kinds of fires, if that makes sense, where it's just like, I'll say less. I'll say less for the moment. But I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, Alex, or have had experience in that way where you're just like, where is the communication here? And where is, like, you know, the organization in the very least?
You know, I haven't had too much experience on the set of films, but in terms of communication amongst producers, that can even be a big problem sometimes. Because I'll give you an example. My boss was really invested in this one project, you know, maybe not financially 100%, but in terms of targeting actors and actresses that we wanted to work on this project because of the commercial potential that we believed it could have had.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking to these people for a year. And then in the last meeting we had, this producer has basically just tried to dance around the fact that they don't have the funding they said they had, which we would have appreciated if you could have communicated that clearer,
Right.
you know, a fucking year ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of
Yeah.
those things that's like, as the producer, I'm sure they were thinking like, oh, well, maybe we can get the funding by the time we have to tell them this or whatever. But like, you got to be upfront, because like you can't just grab, you know, $20,000 out of the air. Like if you don't have the money, you have to tell people you don't have the money, because maybe they can help you get the money, but they can't do their job without the money. So
well, that's an obstacle I was facing. I think the person has the money, but it was just always a struggle to like get it. And I was just like, I hate these empty promises. Just tell me you can't pay this person in a week then and we'll fucking figure it out. But don't keep promising me every day that this is what you would show up with, because it makes me look like an asshole for no reason, because I'm just trying to do my job. I'm trying to pay people, and then, you're making me feel bad for constantly hounding you, but that's not my problem. Yeah. Like, we're professionals. Like, we need to like pay people, deal with business. So I understand. Oh, if you can tell, I'm fresh hot off of the set. Like, I'm ready to go. I told Tessa, I'm ready to scream into the mic for our podcast. We'll have a private session one day, and like, it was a great learning experience, but some people are like that and you're like, God damn, like I just never want to be put in that position again. For sure. But you learn. And I think absolutely, like, just be straightforward. I think it's just saves everyone the headache, and don't overpromise. Under promise, over deliver, baby. That's just business,
So we've talked a lot about Concourse Media, which is the sales agency, but you also are a script reader for Coverfly. So tell us a little bit about that too, and what that entails.
Basically, I provide feedback for writers who are entering into competitions to raise money for their scripts, and I'm supposed to tell you, based on the criteria of the assignment, what works, what doesn't work, and hopefully you don't hate my opinion.
Sometimes, even if you hate it, it's good. Like, sometimes that feedback's hard to hear, but and you take everything with a grain of salt as well. But you're going off of like an what's the word I want to say? Not an algorithm, but like the certain things that you have to hit. It's not just, oh, I think this script is good or bad. Like, you're telling people that these are the things that their story needs to have, and it's missing it or whatever. So it's so invaluable to have that, like, beyond just an opinion of, do you like this script? It's more of, this is what works and what doesn't. And that's really valuable to have as a writer.
Absolutely. I'll give you an example of a script that I didn't like, but I knew was good. And I knew people would like it who are into those kind of shows. Like, this was a show about lawyers, and I don't have anything against lawyers. I'm not really into that kind of, lawyer jargon driven show where everyone talks like they're hopped up on a bunch of cocaine. Uh, I don't really.
Not your cup of tea. That's not. Yeah.
Not my thing, but I recognized that the pacing was phenomenal, that the stakes were always being raised dramatically, and the tension was high all the time. So I couldn't help but, find that all these lawyers were pretentious assholes, in my opinion, but they were very interesting assholes.
Yeah.
So
Reminds
I
me of
gave
my
it
favorite
like,
show, Succession. It's like everyone's an asshole, and the tension is there the whole time, and you're like, oh, it's so good. I love it. Yeah. But I was
gonna say, reminds me of anything Aaron Sorkin writes. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Like,
the best opinions that you're gonna get are the people that understand, this is gonna sell, or this doesn't work and this is why, as opposed to just, I like your script, I don't like your script.
absolutely. Anyone can, appreciate a certain time period a script was written in, or the aesthetic, but you want someone who, for lack of a better term, is not afraid to hurt your feelings and be kind of an asshole to you, which, is personally, I still need to find that line where I'm not being a complete asshole and telling them, all right, you need to completely redo this.
I mean, as long as you
or
can
something.
tell someone why, because we had run into that before, that someone just didn't like our script and was like, I would start from scratch. Okay, we can handle that feedback, but why? What is it that makes you want us to start over? Like, is there anything there that you like, or is this just not your cup of tea? And so, yeah, I think that's totally legitimate feedback if you can back it up as to why.
Yeah, absolutely. But even then, like, sometimes people just can't accept to themselves, that they've written something that's not good.
Hmm.
And maybe it's because of one little like nitty gritty comment that, me or another script reader will have made that makes the writer completely devalue the whole opinion.
Hmm.
So there's
Mm.
always people on both sides of the spectrum have something to learn all the time.
Yeah, totally. It's a lot of like just shedding your ego, not letting yourself get, upset with that stuff, but it's hard.
Is the process that, because I've used Coverfly to like submit scripts to screenplay competitions, but can you submit directly for a review and you pay for that review from someone like yourself? Is that how that works?
Yeah, pretty much. It's a it does both of those things actually.
Okay.
I give you feedback, and if I place your script high enough in, a ranking of 1 out of 10, you can get in front of producers right away.
Oh shit.
Nice.
Nice. And then as someone like producers as ourselves who are also like we have a screenplay, can we like co-produce it with another producer? That's like I've seen multiple producers attached before on a project. So would that hinder our also relationship to our project? Am I making sense?
Yeah, yeah, you're asking pretty much if there's producers who have a script and they put it on some kind of screenplay coverage service that can get them put on a certain kind of list that gets them in front of other
Yeah.
producers. That's totally fine. I think you can't have enough producers. You can always have more money.
Hmm.
I agree. That was something too that I learned a lot on this last disaster shoot, that, having more more producers, working with I had a producer who worked with me who was actually phenomenal. She was amazing and saved grace. But she was saying too, like she normally on her projects has like a couple producers and then like 5 line producers, just to like keep things flowing well and like organized. So I love that you said that because that is true. Like I've seen it now and I'm like, okay, it makes sense.
Well, it's like, you look at the big, like, actual, like, studio projects that have millions of dollars, they've got so many different kinds of producers. There's the
Yeah,
executive producer, the line producer, UPM, like, all
exactly.
that stuff. And there's a reason for that. So,
Yeah. But that's good to know that like you can still keep you can still be a producer attached to your own project. That's just like I'm, as someone who's always like protective of, our creative IP and like what we're doing, I think it's good to know that you don't lose that or that doesn't hinder you in that way. So that's more so why I was asking.
Yeah, it doesn't hinder you at all. If you get more producers, like executive producers, that's, it's just more money you can get and
Yeah.
um, do more stuff with the film if that is your intention or not. But you will still, retain your place as, the first producer who got the writers and everyone together and the actors and all that. If you package that film,
Mhm.
just knowing people, that's like what they say in Hollywood, it's about who you know.
mhm.
And sometimes it really is, because if you just introduce 2 people, you have a producer credit now.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. No, thank you for saying that. Something we should definitely consider too. But Alex, what gets you excited? If we were to pitch our script to you, what are you like most excited or genres that you love?
I'm really biased now. I love thrillers
Mhm.
and psychological
Oh my
thrillers.
god, our
If it's a
script.
good, oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah, it's a psychological thriller based set in a sci-fi world. No, what else? What else gets you really excited in a story?
I'm probably going to be repeating myself here, but
That's okay.
basically, just how dire the protagonist's circumstances are. I want to see someone who is falling into hell.
Hmm.
Wow. I love that.
Yeah.
Really like strong, like the high stakes of their journey, like in that sense. Sorry.
Whether it be physical or, psychological. Like, I don't know if you guys have seen a movie called The Machinist
Hmm.
with Christian Bale.
Yeah.
To me, yeah, that's an intense struggle that can, have the same levels of intensity as a physical conflict,
Mhm.
where if someone had a gun to your head and is telling you that you have to follow them for the rest of the night, like in Collateral, another psychological thriller where Tom Cruise plays a hitman and he abducts Jamie Foxx's taxi,
Mhm.
who's the taxi driver, and he's like, "All right, I like you, and you also accidentally witnessed this murder, so you're going to be my driver for the night." Unfortunately,
Yeah.
That
Nice.
they're both, yeah, anything that where the character is basically going to die, or if they don't solve this problem,
Yeah.
that stuff is really good to me.
It makes sense because that's compelling. Like that's what's gonna tell the most exciting story. And again, it's not to say that the other stuff can't sell, like the little slice of life movies. I personally like those a lot, but like
I'm like,
the but well, that's the thing. I mean,
and that's the
like
thing.
a
Yeah.
compelling story you can almost guarantee is gonna sell. The other stuff, like some audiences are gonna love it, but it might not be a broad,
Well,
popular thing.
I'd like to even interject that like with our story, and that's something that I made a choice with our circumstance, is it is like definitely like the high stakes come over on a mental like overtaking or death, you can say, capacity, because I didn't want our antagonist to just be the stereotypical murderer. So I didn't want it to be in a death, like a physical death, if that makes sense. So that's where I was trying to find the stakes to be high enough to where it felt like what you're speaking of, but without actually being, the stereotypical psychopath
Like
murderer.
slasher kind of,
Like,
yeah.
yeah, because I feel like that's always how we touch on themes of narcissism, like how those kind of tend to, like a psychopath narcissist, it's so easy to paint them as like, okay, it started out with a murder and then you're like figuring that out. But I feel like in reality, when we come in contact with people in our lives or have relationships in our lives with people like that, it isn't like they're just outwardly killing people or, having these very clear signs. It could be just in the way they are trying to take control and the way they communicate. So if you read our script, you'll see it's kind of more dialogue heavy. That's kind of my style, but that there's these like those kind of probing and ways that then with the technology attached to it, which you will learn about, there's that mental like overtaking and feels like, that the protagonist's loss of control is what really drives her to feel like she's going to not die, but die. Like,
Yeah.
having someone overtake her in that way. Oh
Yeah.
my
But we
gosh.
will definitely connect more via email on how to actually further connect with this after the episode. But for our listeners, I want to wrap up and just, first of all, thank you so much, Alex, for coming on. This has been super helpful for us. So I'm sure it's also been
Yeah.
super helpful for our listeners who are going through the same kind of stuff. Is there any social media or, how our listeners can get in contact with you, or you said like for Concourse to submit through the website, anything like that you would like to share with our listeners?
Well, thank you for having me on. It's been a really good time. Uh, I I would say if the listeners want to get in contact, uh, check our social media page, Concourse Media. We have Instagram, Facebook. I think we have Twitter. I should know this, but I don't have Twitter. And the best way for writers to get noticed by us is just to submit through the website. I've had a couple people send me LinkedIn messages. Please don't do that. Yeah, that's, and in terms of, if someone wants to get experience as a writer, I think reading is also the best way to do that.
Yeah.
And consider doing screenplay analysis for a part-time gig or something like that,
Hmm.
and submit to organizations like Coverfly and see if you can, as a writer, find some good feedback there, or see if you can do something as a reader too, because that will give you the best experience as a writer, in my opinion.
Yeah, I love that. I mean,
That
it's
is
like,
great advice.
yeah,
Really great advice.
for our actor listeners, it's kind of like, they say become a reader for auditions for casting directors, because it gives you the practice. It lets you see what the, behind the scenes and everything. So it's the same kind of deal. Yeah, absolutely.
It could definitely help actors too, because the more an actor understands what a narrative is, I think they can get out of their own skin and out of their own heads and realize that this is like a moving thing.
Yeah.
So it's not just about you, even though you're coming from that perspective of what are my needs and goals, you can, I guess, maybe lose some of those nerves
Hmm.
by just examining the bigger picture, realizing that everyone is in this game too.
Yeah,
Hell
totally.
yeah. Absolutely. I think that's such great advice. And yeah, the I was just gonna say too, like reading not only scripts, but would you say like books, like anything?
Sure.
Sure.
Anything that's a story, I think will do it.
Hmm.
Even comic books, graphic novels, actual novels,
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Alex, so much. This was super helpful for us.
Dude, thank you.
Thanks for listening to Femme Regard Podcast. If you like what you hear, tune in every Friday for more tips on the filmmaking business and insightful conversations with industry professionals.
We can only grow with your support, so please subscribe, share, rate, and review. You can also join the Femme Fam on Patreon. For more on us, check us out at femregard.com.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.